Hey everybody, this is Dan Keldsen, Chief Innovation Officer with infocap.ai, and this is another episode of Next Future Today. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Jack Crawford. He's the CEO and co-founder of mVara. That's mVara. He's also ex-Wells Fargo. He was at Cognizant. He was at Datalog AI. And back when he was in the U.S. Air Force, all of these things might come to play in our conversation, which is all about AI. If you look into either of our backgrounds, especially right now, there's a lot of AI going on in our world. And the core concept here is you're probably thinking both too small and too slow about AI. And what does that mean? Not that everybody needs to become a master of AI, but you probably need to be thinking well beyond just putting in a couple of prompts, a couple of sentences, asking relatively simple questions that aren't really delivering some value. The only way to really see what the potential value is of generative AI and agentic AI and this whole universe of AI is to be running experiments. We talk a lot about this, hackathons versus proof of concepts, there are lots of different things. So if you are feeling like maybe you're behind or you're intrigued, but you're not sure where to go with your AI experience and actually trying to drive to some real value that you can get out of it, which may just be like becoming a much faster learner, which is a big thing that we talk about in this interview, then I think this interview is going to be really interesting for you. Jack has an extensive background in enterprise situations where it's in regulated industries like banks, Wells Fargo, lots of situations where they needed to be very careful and yet still be pushing the boundaries to try to get ahead of their competition and really take advantage of what's possible. So interesting dynamics. If you're interested in AI at all, and especially in a business setting, then I think this is going to be a great episode for you, but let's go find out. So Jack, it's so good to see you again and to actually have you on my show, Next Future Today. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here. Always glad to speak with people about artificial intelligence.
Well, and there's more to life than AI, it turns out, but we'll try to stay focused on AI and what that means to people right now.
We got to keep our lives. That's the one thing that
Yes.
needs to survive this AI revolution is our humanity.
Yes, exactly. Well, and that's why, so at InfoCap, we talk about human-centric automation. We keep in mind we're trying to serve people, we are people doing work. There's a whole world out there that's well beyond just the tech side. So we should be keeping that in mind. Otherwise, what's the point? I've seen some bad sci-fi movies that take that a little too far.
Yeah, that's so true. And movies are all robotic. This is a software revolution. It isn't really a revolution of machines themselves. We'll see that much further down the pike, I think.
So we've been in similar circles. We've run across each other many times. We have some common friends, some of our mutual friends. And actually, you were interviewed by Tom Kalopoulos, who's my business partner in Plexicam. We co-wrote a book. We worked together for 13 years. He's the reason that I got into automation, workflow, business process, all that kind of stuff 31 years ago, as of a couple of weeks ago. So very smart guy. I love the interview that he did with you. Great to hear that. And Chris Surdak, who I just interviewed ago. You've known him for quite a while, right?
Yeah, since his early books and almost like with you and Tom, your early book was just amazing. That kicked me off in this whole idea of how our world is changing. And it has changed quite a bit since then.
And he was a lot of fun to talk to. I don't know him terribly well, so we did a little pre-screening, and we actually did a webinar with him in IRPA. But having a conversation with him, we pull from similar, somewhat obscure threads, which is lovely for me because it feels like therapy that I'm maybe not crazy. So part of the point of Next Future Today is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, 80 years ago. The next best time to do it is right now. So if something like a pandemic happens or the massive upswell of generative AI and ChatGPT and all that, you can wait till sometime in the future before you start doing anything about it, or you can act immediately, or you can just spend a lot of time thinking about something and never acting. What I'm trying to do when I talk to people is pull out, if great minds think alike, it's actually what you're aiming for. That's not what you should do. You want diverging opinions. You want different experiences. You don't want a whole bunch of yes men saying that, yes, absolutely, generative AI is the one and only thing that you want. So I like to pull different experiences so that I can make sure that I'm not blind to something and pass that along for the people that are not like you and I, who like to live on the sort of cutting edge of things and really experiment and give them some way to avoid some mines in the minefield maybe and actually get to value. So historically, you've been involved in AI for at least 10 years, is that right?
Oh, at least, right. And at that time, where are we, 2025? That's where natural language processing really began to become mainstream for people around 2014, 2015. And have been involved even before that in analytics and traditional traditional machine learning.
There's an awful lot of hype, which is exciting, and there's some real stuff there. But trying to get away from the hype, you started mVara, CEO, co-founder, about a little over a year ago at this point.
Yeah, when I left Wells, I just see a tremendous opportunity for all businesses, not just large companies like Wells and the other parts of the Fortune 1000. But the business opportunity is wherever there's waste, wherever there's an area that you can smooth things down, shorten time cycles. And I see that in large middle market companies. Not that I'm not interested in Fortune 1000 companies. Certainly, I want to bring as much assistance as we can to all players in the market, but particularly in the United States. We have, give me on the number, I think it's something like 250,000 businesses, from dog groomers all the way up to large manufacturing firms in the, let's just say, the $1 billion revenue range. And all of these companies have staffs that have been working with traditional tools like Microsoft Office tools for decades. And it's time for change. And the vendors that provide tools are also bringing AI right into the core of their application. So when you enter, you're already in AI, whether you know it or not, or even whether you like it or not, because it's being bundled. And for good reason, because there's power and capability to improve your business and improve individual workforce productivity. I've thought about productivity and says, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because in a way, productivity cuts jobs back if you just look at the output for an economy at that point in time. But the United States economy and most of the world, the GDP has been growing steadily as technology has been brought to change things. We're using technology right at the moment that's far more advanced than we had 10 years ago. And nobody's lost their job in the podcasting business. In fact, it's become more powerful, more impactful. So that's where I see things going.
So a lot of your career, I think it's safe to say, has been in enterprise IT.
Mostly around just doing the job of using technology to make business better and to create better products for consumers and other customers. Every business is defined by the customer that it has. I always like to think that when I go home at night and I have food on the table and I'm paying my lodging, rent or mortgage, that is my customers paying that. And so we have a duty in all businesses to deliver value, or even in government or in social organizations. If you're going to work every day, don't think that you deserve the money because of just showing up. We all need to create things. And that's part of it, is, again, the GDP of countries, is if we want to give a better life for ourselves and our children, the way forward is to just get better.
So hints of lean thinking in there, lean manufacturing, all the reduction of waste stuff. Let's take for mVara and the work that you're doing. What's a day in the life for mVara, and what are you doing for your customers? And then I'll spin off from there into a related direction.
As you talked about earlier, I am a board person. And so we're building an agentic framework as part of a product capability in time. But I want that to be informed by business. So we're a Windsor partner, which is, I believe, the leading tool in software acceleration. But what we're doing is bringing that to business users, knowledge workers, for example. I've worked with over the years and been one of them that pulls spreadsheets together to produce a report. And information is critical to decision makers. And in every business, whether it's a small business or a large company, the leaders in the company make decisions every day. And to make those decisions, good, accurate, meaningful information is required. I don't like the word actionable, because we should be taking action even without information. But with information, you make better decisions. And so that's been my kind of life activity, even starting from my military background. When I went in the Air Force, I worked on weapon systems acquisition, which was information-centric at a time when information was on sheets of paper. And the use of computers at that time was largely around accounting and finance, and actually in the weapon system. But in your office, you have buck slips. We call them buck slips. Is where you got something you're reading or passing on, and it's got your name on it and a bunch of other people's names on it, and you initial after you've read it and pass it on. There was one copy of a document. Email was new. And I think it's the way our world has been, that in government and well-funded national governments, you'll see technology advancing far ahead of what happens in the consumer space. That's flipped with AI. Literally, the government is going to Google, they're going to Amazon and Microsoft to get access to the technology that's been rapidly advancing. I find that a great opportunity for anybody in business, is that you're at the leading edge. You're not adopting a technology 10 years after it's invented. I mean, the very devices we're using were invented by the Army. Cellular technology was used in Singapore for communications on the battlefield to bring the nodes closer together. And so as we drive down the road and our phones still work, we can thank the government for helping us have that. But it took 10 years for that technology to enter the workforce. Global positioning systems, which I worked on in the Air Force, they took another 10 to 15 years to become commonplace. AI is absolutely opposite. I mean, it is like the leader leaders and the scientists that are working for what we see have led and introduced AI in almost every aspect of business, life, and government. We can see Washington AI is being used to create efficiencies, if you will. It's very shocking. And maybe that shock was coming to businesses as well. So that's why I'm doing mVara, because I want to be part of that and help people navigate that. Really, it's just rapidly moving. So waiting isn't really an option. I say waiting's not an option. If you wait, you won't learn enough to be able to actually operate in that environment the same way your competitors will. So it's also competitive competition. If you want to stay in first place, well, then you can't wait while your close follower or actually new entrant may be eating your lunch, so to speak. So you can't be Blockbuster. You got to be Netflix. You got to move forward. And we have modern analogies, but at that point, I'd say that's where I find really a tremendous amount of ability to go into a business and literally within days, weeks, show them how they can accelerate what they're doing. So that's my story, if you will, about what I'm doing at the moment. Get back to you. What's exciting in this marketplace? Are we afraid of what's happening or what's coming?
I see great opportunity. So I have a music background, and one of the sayings in music is that an overnight success takes 20 years, which is typically true in technology too. Like the first album by an artist has had 20 years to percolate. It's everything that's led up to their life and going through in teenage angst and whatever else. And then what do you know? That first album that just came out, it's amazing. And then the sophomore release is often terrible because they put everything they had into that first record, and then they're done. It can be the same thing. You see that with technology companies all the time who they try to milk too much of what they first built for as long as possible. And then before you know it, it's a classic disruptive innovation situation where somebody comes along and chews out their ankles. And next thing you know, they've dead. Maybe they stumble and right themselves. But I think there's some benefit, not necessarily having to be at the very front of the bleeding edge that's going on. And in a lot of ways, I've kind of realized that if you think of the crossing the chasm model or diffusions of innovation, people that wait or organizations that wait until things have become much more predictable, reliable, verifiable, that others have used it and gotten success, and it's become much cheaper. There's a lot of smart things about that sort of mindset that I didn't always appreciate. But right now, if you're not paying at least some attention, my working title for our interview was "You're thinking too small about AI." It's probably better you're thinking too slow about AI, or a combination of both, because you need do experiments, see what they turn into, and try to do them as quickly as you can. I mean, so you're Air Force, so the OODA loop and Colonel John Boyd, 42nd Boyd, that's what the OODA loop is all about. How do you see what's going on, decide what observe, think you believe is going on, decide how you're going to react, and actually do the act and spin around as fast as possible. It's never been possible to be faster with software development, right, than it is right now, right? So I think that's the opportunity that you're looking at.
Speed is the thing. Where ago with Jeffrey Moore, when he wrote Crossing the Chasm, I can't speak for him. The way I understood it, the way I read it, is that hardware is slow to be adopted, and software at the time as well, because it takes so long to make improvements. And investments were high. So if you ended up buying a software application for your business, you'd pay quite a bit per user to have that and spend a lot of money doing the implementation. You're cutting over from your old system to listening to cloud. So moving from on-premise to cloud was a big investment for people. But what I recommend, honestly, is more permissive use of artificial intelligence rather than pilot projects and experiments. Because pilot project experiments are often restricted to a small number of people. And so they have their results. And they still need to build the enthusiasm across the rest of the organization, the acceptance of the value of artificial intelligence. And I believe the only way you get that is by actually bringing in amounts of artificial intelligence at every level. So every employee today we should turn the AI switches on in Microsoft Office, turn on the AI switches in Confluence and Jira and other tools that are cloud tools, Salesforce.com. All those have those capabilities today, and they're rapidly improving. AI can be implemented safely if it's done thoughtfully, but you need to move fast and you need to make it wide access in a company. And I know that's technology, but things have improved quite a bit as far as bring greater safety to what AI responses are, but even better than that, better outcomes and more accurate results from artificial intelligence, bringing AI agents into business as an augmentation to human function. When I say human function, I've got a job. I'm good at my job because I've done it for 20, 30 years and trusted by my colleagues. So we bring in this new artificial intelligence and it's not trusted by anybody, but under my tooling, under my involvement, it could make me better at what I do and also help me help my team members become better at what they do. If we do that, then we're more competitive. And competitiveness is what America's all about. No offense to the rest of the world, but that's where we lead. We lead in innovation. We lead in competitiveness. That's just who we are. And the rest of the world can learn as we go. But we will win the AI race, not because it's AI, but because we know how to apply it in our endeavors. And plus, we lead the technology until proved otherwise.
So AI is ripe with experiments right now. There's probably at least 2,000 models that are known about, and vastly more that are not public known, and a lot of them are not any good. Not your average Joe can just create their own large language model at this point. Maybe at some point, although I'm not sure why that would be necessary.
I think there'll always be with tremendous capital resources and large data centers that you'll see that AIs that are available are going to be dramatically more powerful than what you can do on your own. What you buy today, you can probably install in your computer in a year and run just fine. So if the suitability of what it does, which is still far better than many human tasks, then yeah, we'll all have it. Just like every other thing. We're able to do things today we couldn't have done 10 years ago.
One of the things we talked about or two ago when we caught up was I've been a fan of hackathons for a long time. And a hackathon is typically like a 24-hour experience where you get whoever wants to participate in the hackathon in your company, business, technology, marketing, executives, doesn't really matter. Best in my experience to say, let's target some things. We're looking to improve pipeline production or, reduce processing time for new loans or whatever it happens, whatever business you happen to be in. Something that you recommended is, what if you take two teams and tackle the same project? You're aiming for something, a new product idea or looking for some massive improvement. One gets AI assistance and one does not. How have you seen that play out, either personally or through clients that you've worked with and stories that they've told you?
I don't know if I would be interested as a participant to play on the non-AI side. So it would be a cohort that's very confident and talented and capable and say, we're going to prove AI wrong. And then the other side might be the vibe coders, people that may not have all those experiences and skills. It remains to be seen. So if you want to hold a hackathon, I'm all for it. It is going to be something new. There have been many, many opportunities to do vibe coding or let's just shoot, massively AI assisted types of experiments. And what works in companies, when we did hackathons at my last company that I worked at Wells, the organization created these mock APIs or application programming interfaces to the back end. So we weren't actually touching the mainframe, but we did have great APIs. They worked exactly like the real thing. And we're able to do experiments. And the one that I've worked on was to see if we could do a better job of environmental impact reporting. So even in finance, companies have an opportunity to get scored on their contribution to the sustainability of the economy, in both environmentally, and that kind of reporting is complex because you have all kinds of spending and carbon credits here and there. So we built this. We didn't win, but we did not use AI. Actually, on that one, we did not use AI except for some of the conceptual stuff because in the sandbox we didn't have those tools. I'd really like to see one where you have one versus the other.
What you're doing with Windsurf, and there's other competitors, Cursor, Replit, there's a whole host of alternatives. Before we get too far, can you describe what those are so we don't assume that everybody knows what we're talking about?
Products that we're seeing today are a growth and extension of what was called Code Complete. And Code Complete for software engineers has been in play for a long time. So that means that you're writing a line of code has to follow a syntax that you learned in college and you learn how to do better. And you're looking at the whole context of, let's say, one program, and you're trying to say, okay, if I change this variable name, it would change that variable name throughout that one program. And it's called, a degree of factoring, making sure that everything's consistent. And it really helps software quality. But the software engineer still had all the responsibility to figure it out in their heads and think of the business requirements and translate that to actual code that would run and survive a testing phase. What's happened in less than 4 to 6 months is that entire code is being written first draft by the AI so that the programmer doesn't have to type pages and pages of programs. But for anything that's going to be used today in a production manner, you still pretty much have to go through all the code. So you have to know what the code is in order to use it in a productive way. But these coding assistants still have the same environment. You still see the files. And that's what makes it actually acceptable in a business environment, that everything's under human audit, human view. But the productivity that I'm seeing is more than 10 times. There's nothing that's ever come along that makes anyone 10 times more productive. And what we're doing in mVara is bringing it to other people that are non-programmers. So in every project, you have a design team that lays out what the screens look like. If you're building a website, a mobile app, or even an internal app, you have people that have good design aesthetics and have been to design school and know what they're doing. Well, it turns out artificial intelligence, large language models, have also gone to design school and they know how to do all this. So in the hands of an educated designer, you can actually build things even faster and build your diagrams and your workflows. You're bringing things together for the software. So good software quality doesn't come by testing your own stuff. It comes when somebody else tests your code. And the ultimate determinant is the end user. When the end user actually uses the software, when they give feedback and identify bugs, they are also testers. But why can't they all be using a tool that's embedded with artificial intelligence capability? And we're seeing already real productivity improvements. So here's the shocking thing. If you can achieve 10x with a programmer who has tremendous skill and those make their productivity high, you can take someone with far less skills, which will make them as productive almost as a programmer. Then it's not 10x, it's 100x. Somebody becomes 100 times more capable. So now we go into smaller businesses where there are less people. There are less technical people. You still have a good proportion of business people, and make them 100 times more productive in generating reports that decisions are made from, or improving, let's say, a human resources onboarding, any of those things, recruiting. As you said earlier, almost every business function workflow has some waiting time, some inefficiencies. And this is where AI can come in by cutting those waiting times down and creating new efficiencies and giving business users the ability to actually glue things together better. So instead of a spreadsheet macro, you're actually writing a program with a dashboard. It's totally okay for your department. You don't have to worry about it being production ready because it's no different than what you already are doing for yourself with Microsoft Office. So that's the vision of the team. 2025. By next year, many employees will be using tools like let's just say the generation beyond windsurf, the one where it's more accessible to non-programmers and programmers alike.
There's been lots of waves of tools that are meant to be enablers for citizen developers, or call them whatever you like. There's always a different flavor, sort of rebranding the idea. I've worked on a ton of enterprise technology projects, and some of them are super complex, and trying to visualize everything and coordinate everything, and like you talked about migration. How do you go from small enough to get started to actually then expand it into really delivering some, like, wow, I'm not sure how I would have done this if I hadn't chosen AI assistance as some way to get me to a future that I wasn't sure I could actually accomplish?
There's just a small gap in education between going from what we've gotten used to with Google and other search engines to ask one question and get a number of responses, usually a list of websites, which you then drill into and try to find the information you're looking for. The Google of today will summarize those websites and give you a little AI blurb at the top. So we're getting that experience of asking one question. The next level of sophistication is when you ask a follow-up question. So you read this summary and say, oh, actually, I'm interested in this, or the search engine didn't get the answer, didn't understand what I was really asking for, or I didn't articulate it well enough. And so this burden initially with ChatGPT and others to get your prompt right, get your question perfectly right. And there were lots of helpers out there. So, if you write your prompt this way, next thing you know, it's really long. Well, if I know all that work, why don't I just do it myself? And but what's changed is that these models now can reason. They're operating like agents. So when you communicate with ChatGPT, if you're in that one chatbot interface, it's actually kicking off all kinds of AI agents that are going and researching this and figuring out. And when they get back, when they respond, they're not giving you a very lightweight response, actually a very good response, because it's interpreting more about what you really had your intent. And this is what natural language processing is. It's understanding what is your intent. Is when you really leverage its reasoning and its rationalization. But to do that, investing time in a dialogue back and forth actually yields tremendously better results. And if you're after results, why not spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even come back an hour later and pick up where you left off. I carry on conversations for days on a particular topic because we get closer and closer to a convergence of really getting something done. I've created a plan, a 60-page document. It's been refined or edited a bunch of times. So I'm engaging the AI as a fellow employee, even though it's not a real being. It's not a human being, but it works. It works really hard. It works really well. And when you engage it with a little more respect for its knowledge, you're going to get more out of it. You'll see a tremendous additive value. If you don't, then you're still learning. And if you do, then you've learned it. And that's all we need. Every AI is a quantum computer with knowledge. This has been trained on every bit of knowledge that we've been able to scratch from the internet and in some cases, private sources or purchase data. There's very little that a model doesn't know. It depends on us to engage with it and draw it out, to draw out this latent, if you will, latent intelligence that today is currently available. So this is why I'm excited about tools help people engage in that dialogue and actually build something that's a concrete artifacts, multiple artifacts for whatever job you're doing.
But we all have data to interpret, what are our sales like today versus yesterday, or today versus the beginning of the year, right? Pre-tariff changes or the first wave of tariff changes, for example. And, if you have data scientists who can do that for you, or you have systems built that automatically are tracking that kind of stuff, that's fantastic. But for everybody else, things that are super valuable skills to have, but you don't personally have them, you can't hire them fast enough. I could see that, generative AI kinds of things give you a leg up to start asking the kinds of questions that are on your mind and refine it and do things like it's like having like a very personalized tutor. What have I not asked that a supply chain expert would ask about this data? Use it as an iterative tool to learn about the process itself and things that you may not be aware of, as well as getting answers along the way. I mean, that I think that's one of the strongest things to me, where it's an exploratory and not just tell me how many orders we had yesterday. You don't need AI for that. If you don't have some way of knowing how many orders you had, you have bigger problems.
I've been thinking about this. Mathematics, calculus, is the language of mathematics is symbolic by necessity. You compress things down to a single Greek letter, for example. And it's true in many science fields as well. But anything where you're applying mathematics, it's not something that's in English, so to speak. It's not in your French or whatever language you speak. It's not in human language. It's in symbolic language. The starting point is that large language models, even though they have the word language in them, are symbolic. At the very core, it's a number, except it's billions of numbers. They have patterns and influences. They're all in there, but they are manifested in words, or as you'll hear the word for many cases, token. A token is something that approximates a word. It may be one word and part of the next word, or it could be part of one word. But essentially, it's a string of words that form from language. Language models, you can actually have both conversations. And the model is quite capable at understanding what you're talking about and communicating in the way that you want. So if you ask a model, says, explain this to me as if I were a 12-year-old, you'll get an explanation as if you were a 12-year-old. If you said, explain it as if I were a toddler, you'll get an explanation as if you were a toddler. But it's the same topic. When they give you that result, then you could then query it in your natural language. So we're moving from the very advanced data understanding of a data scientist down to someone, as you admitted, maybe wasn't trained in data science, but you still have the same question. The question is, which store should we close? Which store should we open? Which leases should we renew? That's like just a general retail problem if someone has a lot of stores for their business. And that's where it comes down to the data, but the data rolls up to, I'm just asking the question because the CEO asked. And I understand the business impacts. I understand the schedules for getting jobs done. So how can I get that decision-making answer earlier? And this is where it could be all kinds of employees in the enterprise. You still have data scientists. It's just they're doing more. You're doing your job. You're doing it faster. And you're giving yourself more time to really apply your human gut and intuition to the story that you're sharing with your leader who needs to make a decision. I believe it will have more companies and less employees per company because AI agents will be involved. The dismal view or dystopian view is we'll have less companies and less employees, which means, what are the rest of us going to do? And it's really up to us as individuals. Get on the AI bandwagon, if you will. Get in and learn how to engage with an AI. I know that everyone has access to some free GPT type thing. They're all over the internet. Begin to engage with them and see the power of engagement. Whether it's your personal life or business, doesn't matter. But there is this latent intelligence that will drive your output and your understanding and give you more free time and many other things. So this is why I'm so enthusiastic about today and where we're going to be in a year. Don't wait. I'll tell all your listeners, if you're waiting, then you picked the wrong time to wait. You should wait, 20 years ago when the iPhone, or 15 years ago when the iPhone was introduced. Here, wait a year. It'll be okay. It'll be a better phone next year. The waiting time, the cycle now is months, not years for waiting. So if you want to wait a month, that's fine. So with the phone, you had to make the phone better memory, better processing. With software, that constraint is gone. It's basically all software is infinitely replicable. If you come up with a good program, you can deploy it on 1,000 computers. You deploy it on 1,000 computers, have those 1,000 programs talking to each other and creating even better software. So we're going to see this just total exponential curve going with machine intelligence. And I want to be, and I think everyone should be in the leverage of technology to make better lives for everyone rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you. But otherwise, your next boss might be an AI. So wouldn't you rather be a boss of it?
Well, yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, hiring decisions made on being run through AI, you survive the gauntlet and whatever the prompts are and, and the filters. It's certainly an interesting world. There's a ton that we could talk about. I mean, we had a little hint about agentic AI or AI agents, and there's some controversy, as there always on are those the exact same thing or different things. That I think we could get wrapped around the axle on that one for a little bit. But I think this trend toward everything starts out kind of terrible in technology. It's very rough, and that's how things work out from an enterprise standpoint and from an actually delivering an outcome. Instead of it just being a tool, having a system of agents that are helping you to, like you mentioned, you ask the question of ChatGPT, it potentially fires off other agents that do reasoning and start directing other pieces to pull back information or screen out information, or there's a whole bunch of scenarios like that. That's where the real value is. So like to the idea of this episode, you're thinking too small, you're thinking too slow about AI when you should be thinking way beyond just a couple of prompts into what can I do to rapidly come up to speed on a new industry or a new trend or something like that. And you can really be super empowered to then maybe you ask a bunch of questions that you would have normally asked your data team, but if you can get to better questions to ask them up front because you spent some time running through it, then everybody benefits from that. Like it's to like the 100 times improvements that you're talking about.
I've got homework. I've got homework to go run a hackathon with A versus B, and then I've got homework to take some of these ideas that you shared with me. This is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And we're always learning. This is a great time to be learning.
Yeah, it's never been easier. I mean, that's actually the book that Tom Koulopoulos and I wrote, The Gen Z Effect. That was 2014.
Yep.
One of the 6 courses that we talk about is about learning and dynamic learning. And it was hints of what we're seeing now, like the things we just talked about. And I keep getting royalty checks. So apparently people are still buying it, which is awesome.
Or maybe they'll pick up a copy today. I recommend it highly. Get it on Kindle, get it in hard copy. Just grab a copy of The Gen Z Effect.
Oh, thank you. Before we wrap up here, so what's the best way for people to get a hold of you to talk to you directly and find out more about what mVara is doing?
I love being reached out to on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn profile is LinkedIn and Jack Crawford. So you'll find me that way, or just search for Jack C. Crawford. You'll find me on LinkedIn. If you've got, a learning question or whatnot, I'll take a moment and respond to a DM or just engage on a post. I'd be happy to do that. That's the easiest way. If you want to reach me otherwise, there's mVara.ai, but that's going to be very businesslike. So if you have something just of interest, do that, and then we'll see where it goes. But I'm eager to be a mentor to anyone. I'd like to see more adoption and more traction in this space in this year.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jack. Glad we had a chance to talk about things that are on camera so other people can benefit from what we're talking about. And if you do run any of the experiments that I threw out to you, I'm not expecting you to do them, but if you do, I'd love to hear.
Okay, so you're getting royalty checks from the book, but you're okay without them for this. That's fine. That works. We'll find some other way to give you some benefit. But hopefully, that invitation extends to you. If you want to push the envelope a little bit, give me a call and we'll give you some homework assignments.
All right. I might take you up on that one.
Okay. All right. Then.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. This was fun.
Yes. Thank you. You too.